Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, like button, subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated. As you can see, I'm going to be joined in 1 minute by the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein. Don't forget, we're back to Therapy Tuesday. So 7:30 p.m. Tuesday, live YouTube stream. Join us there. Bring your rants, bring your questions. Lots of questions to look at after this game and going forward about the team, about Sale, whatever you want to know. I'll give you some answers and Bram will chime in wherever he can, as you know. So today we're here to talk about a crushing loss to the Vikings, 2017. Bram, they had this one.
Yeah.
This is a crusher because this would have been a big, big win for them.
Yeah. It's a tough turn of events, tough loss. The interception that kind of flipped it in the fourth quarter was a really bad turnover. The penalty on that chip shot field goal is obviously a killer and negated any chance of them pulling off a comeback. So it's a tough one. I mean, but they've been living on the edge for a month now. And they easily could have lost in Indianapolis last week, lost in Chicago. And they got to figure out a way to put more points on the board, frankly. And I thought this was the week that they would. And unfortunately, they didn't.
Why do you think that they didn't?
I'm surprised they couldn't run the ball very effectively today. And that's concerning to me because obviously I think we both probably agree that, in my opinion, at least, I don't think there's a group that they can put out there this year that's going to be a really good pass protection group that they can move things around. And, it might be time to go back to Cosme, honestly, at right tackle, if he's healthy enough to do it. And then they're going to have to look at right guard again. But they're just mixing and matching personnel. And I just don't, I don't feel like that they have a group that is going to come out and be great, So they're consistently going to have protection issues, which leads you to believe like they need to run the ball pretty well. And they haven't done it in a few weeks running now. And I was a little more surprised today than I was in the previous couple of weeks. They couldn't do it.
Minnesota, they have defended the run better lately. So I thought it might be harder than I thought. At the end of the week, I thought it was going to be harder for them to run the ball than I thought going into the week. But I thought they would be able to move the ball better and score at least a few more points. That was disappointing. I think Minnesota did a good job containing Heinicke in the pocket and preventing him from getting outside, making plays with his legs. We didn't see him really be able to extend many plays, and that's to their credit. And he tried to duck out and do some of his Houdini stuff, and it just didn't work. And then, it's funny, Bram, because I know whenever they lose a game like this, it's gonna, you're gonna look at Heinicke and say one thing. They win a game like last week, you're gonna look at it and say another. It's always like this wild pendulum swing with him and referendums on who he is and where he's at in his career. But, and this will. I don't want to make this all about him because you're right. The run game to me is a bigger issue because you can't get that going. That's a bigger issue right now than who's playing quarterback. But for Heinicke, let's go to him first. What did you think of his game?
Worst of the three, opinion. The interception was really bad throw. They ran a trick play that should have ended up in a John Bates touchdown or a 1st and goal in the 5, and he just literally missed it.
I don't know where that ball was going.
Yeah, it wasn't even close. He had a really bad throw to wide open Logan Thomas on a play that would have extended a drive. And that throw to Curtis Samuel, like, why in the world he would throw that there? He's just very lucky, that ended up, it's one thing the week before where he throws it up to McLaurin and it's a one-on-one play, he gives him a shot to make a play. It's another thing when you throw it into triple coverage and you get lucky that a referee picks one of the players and the other two guys for some reason don't go after the ball. And I don't want to take anything away from Curtis Samuel. That's an unbelievable play that he made. But that ball should have never been thrown there, obviously. No. So this was and he was, inaccurate is a understatement in the first half. Yeah. So this was, in my opinion, worst of his 3 games and not even close, actually.
And absolutely. And on the interception, the problem there were 2 problems. One, he's got to look, it's the pivot route to, I think it was Dax Mill underneath. It's there for 5 or 6 yards. That was his first read. It was there. And it wasn't going to pick up a first down. unless he makes a guy miss, then he gets 15 yards. But short of that, let's say he gets tackled 5 or 6 yards. Now it's 3rd down and 5 or so. But he looked off of him because he felt like the corner on that side was going to play differently than he did. So he got off that. He should have stayed there. That was the first one. And then then going to Thomas was open. It's just that it's a hard to throw. And the hard part in there, this is where some of the restrictions show up for him. He couldn't step into that throw, and he's got a guy coming back, being pushed back into him. So you've got to throw over the top, and then you got to throw over the top of a linebacker who's in front of Thomas, and now it's Sale. And that was just a very tough play. And, you make the right read, you go to the first guy, and it's 3rd down and 5, and you're still moving the ball. And I think he got a little bit greedy, and it cost him. And the inaccuracy cost him. Listen, on the 4th and 1, he puts it behind McLaurin. If you lead him, if you get him and you put on the inside shoulder, you put on the outside shoulder, it's probably a 1st down. I wasn't crazy about the play call. I'll get your opinion in a minute. But I also, going back to the run, I think first of all, it's less than a yard. It's like 1/3 of a yard. But even on that play, I went back and watched it, Bram, and like that whole side of the line gets pushed back on the play. So if they had run the ball to that side, it's probably a 1-yard loss. But anyway, curious if anything to say to that one. It's about any of that.
I love the 4th and 1 call. Obviously, in hindsight, it doesn't look good because it's an incomplete pass. But 4th and a half a yard, I don't know. Like a lot of teams are doing this, like push the quarterback forward thing on a sneak.
Right.
You don't think you can get a half yard with Brian Robinson, with Arma blocking in front of him, like. So, that call's certainly, worth looking at. I don't think it made or broke the game, but I didn't particularly like that one. Listen, the challenge flag on 3rd and 1 came back to bite them pretty hard.
Yeah.
1, because clearly they were wrong, but 2, you do have to question on 3rd and 1 at that juncture of the game. Do you challenge it, just at all, especially if it's that close, because you put yourself at a disadvantage if it fails. So there's some, listen, there's like, it's an everybody thing, like special teams today. Gibson had a great return, but Percy Butler misses a down punt at the 2-yard line. Obviously the penalty at the end of the game is devastating. I haven't seen a replay of it, so I don't know if it's the right call or not.
I think it was the right call.
Just devastating play that ruined any chance of coming back. So this was the second time this year that the special teams had a few things that were kind of left to be desired. Tressway was very good again. And Gibson did give them the spark they've been looking for clearly on kickoff returns. But, there were a couple plays there that I'm sure they would love to have back too.
Listen, and you didn't even mention the first one, which was the wild goose penalty. They have the ball at the 45. His holding penalty, and that knocks him back to their own 35. So
yep, that was a 20-yard penalty on that one. There was a 17-yard penalty on the not downed punt inside the 5. Right. And they had you can't commit that type of foul at that time of game at the end of the game that ruined their chance of having any shot at a comeback.
And Tressway's been fantastic this year. Yeah. His worst punt of the day was the last one. It was 44 yards, not as much hang time as usual. I'm going to give him a pass on that because he's been phenomenal. He should have had 4 down inside the 20 today if they hadn't messed the one up. So, but that was it just so happened that of the 5 punts, the worst one of that group was last. Yeah. It wasn't a disastrous punt, but it certainly was one where you're used to him bailing him out even more than he did there. So those little details kill you in games like this. And it's funny because you go back to the 3-game winning streak, you can extend this back to Tennessee, because I know that game still haunts them internally. Or maybe haunt may be a strong word, but they still look at that game as one that, it's almost like the New Orleans game last year. You shouldn't have lost that one. And then I think this one, they're going to be haunted by that too, because it's another game. But again, you're fortunate that the Bears couldn't punch it in from 1 yard, right? And you're fortunate that the Colts, what happened at the end of the game there. So, but man, Bram, it's just those little things in these games add up to a ton.
They're living on the edge. I mean, and there are going to be plenty of times that this just doesn't go their way. If every game is going to come down to, a field goal, then, there's no margin for error. So all these things then like become these like big, huge moments. And it doesn't feel like they're capable of overcoming many of them,
It's a
like,
good team
because
like this.
they're stuck in these games. And, I think the hard part for me with that is like, I do look at their skill position people, and whether it's Heinicke or Wentz playing quarterback, I do think it's like we're getting to the point now where we need to expect them to score more points.
Well, I
Like,
think Jahan Dotson coming back should help.
yeah,
I don't know how much, but it will help.
but on any given play, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas, Antonio Gibson, and then I would say a pretty good third receiving option, and like Cam Sims is on the field. Like, I think, even without Jahan Dotson, like, I just think this was the week I thought they were going to score more points, because this was, in my opinion, while they might have been playing better, the worst defense that they've played in a while, really. And I thought they had opportunities here. And I felt like coming in, if Dotson had played, I don't know how Minnesota was going to cover our receivers. But like, because Heinicke had no time, this team rushes 3 or 4, and they were getting home so much. Like, the pressure rate is so high. Like, I'll be interested to see the grades on it, but the pressure rate is high. And it's funny, the last couple of weeks, the pressure rate for Green Bay and Indianapolis was as high or higher than anything that had happened earlier in the season.
Right.
It's just that Heinicke is a little more mobile and was avoiding some of the sacks, and he was making some crazy plays to kind of keep them alive. Still, in the end, them scoring 20 points is like beyond a struggle. So if this is what they're going to average, 17 points a game, how many games are they ultimately going to win? I mean, you're just asking too much of your defense, really.
Not enough. Their defense played great. I mean, they played very well. And
yes.
Yeah, played very well.
Yeah, and in fairness too, like, I think this was the best offense that they've played maybe since Philadelphia. Like, they played Dallas, but it was Cooper Rush. Tennessee's offense doesn't scare you. The Colts offense doesn't scare you. The Bears one was odd. And I actually think they're probably better now than they were when we faced them, because they're actually running Justin Fields. I don't know why they weren't doing it at the time, but they weren't. Green Bay's offense clearly is messed up. I don't know why, but it is. This is the best offense they've faced in weeks. At least the one that had most propensity to have explosive plays. Like, that's the best receiver they have faced since CeeDee Lamb or AJ Brown. With a legitimate run game. That Hawkinson trade, boy, everybody in the NFC ought to be pissed.
That trade may have won this game.
Like, why not this matters for this podcast, but like, that may end up being the most important trade in the NFC this year. Like, the fact that they gave him like makes no sense. The division rival, it made them so much better than they already are. Like,
9 for 70.
And here they are running away with the division. They're going to play at least one home game in the playoffs. Like, the Lions did nobody any favors by doing that.
9 for 70 today for him. Here's the other one. Dalvin Cook, 17 carries, 47 yards. They really did a nice job on him. And one of the keys going in this was put them in position where you have to go 3rd and long so you can get some pressure on Cousins. When they could get pressure on Cousins, he did not play well. He did not throw well. I mean, his game was 22 for 40, 265 because of a couple of big plays. But, the defense did its job for the most part. I mean,
that's the lowest amount of points they've scored during their win streak.
Yeah, no, they did it. And it was set up in part by the one was set up by the interception. So
no, the defense played really well. I mean, Hawkinson had pretty good numbers. Jefferson had really good numbers. Okay. I mean, that's to the point of, this is the best offense that this team has faced in a while.
Justin Jefferson's a pretty good receiver. Justin
Jefferson's awesome. So I feel bad for Benjamin St. Juice. I don't know if robbed is the right word for that play, but that was a tight call. And I see why they made it, but it was a tight call. They were jostling with one another. It was a pretty tight call. And outside of that first drive, I thought St. Juice really held up very well against a very, very good receiver. Maybe one of the best, if not the best in the NFL. Really, really, really good one. So that's an explosive. They have a propensity to be an explosive offense. So I thought the defense played really well. It was the best offense, in my opinion, they've faced since Philadelphia, and they held them to 20 points. Well, that's got to be enough to win. And it wasn't. Like, I walked in going, 17 isn't going to cut it this week. You're not going to be able to win that way. You've got to score 24 to 28. I'll feel safe with 28. They came nowhere near that. And here they are on the wrong side of a game where we're going, well, they could have won it. Yeah, they could have, but it was unrealistic to think you were going to hold that team to 17 or 16 points and win. Right. It's just unrealistic.
and you knew they're going to make some sort of a fourth quarter run because that's what they do. It's funny, because you talk about St. Jude's, two things on that: the interception or the penalty. His mistake was he basically kind of wrapped his left arm as Jefferson's coming. He gets his left arm up too high, and that's where they call it. So if you're going to do that, they're going to call that, whether somebody thinks it's ticky tack or not. They're going to call it. And I know he got beat for the one long one too. That's a really good receiver. So what I like about St. Just is on some of the plays he did make, for example, the one breakup in the end zone, he has a plan for how he plays and why. So, for example, on that one, he's like, I'm going to give him the outside. I want to take the inside away with the leverage. I'll give him the outside because I'm 6'3" and I have the length. I can make up that ground, which is exactly what he did. I think he's a smart young man, and so I think he's going to keep developing as a good corner. So I think that's a good thing. But the other thing with today is that defensive line continues to play really well. And for people who want hope, it comes there. And you get Chase Young back probably almost assuredly this week, but we'll see. And I think that's where you have hope that they actually have something building. The problem is, like, where can this – I mean, do you feel like this offense will get better?
I keep waiting for it. I actually thought it was going to be this week. Like, I loved – this is why I was like, if Dotson plays, I love us on offense against these guys. They can't cover us. Like, but because he didn't, okay, well, you got to find your way around it. I don't think nearly enough downfield passing plays occurred against a team that doesn't cover particularly well. And so that was disappointing, but a lot of that has to do with Minnesota could bring 4 and get pressure. And if this is going to consistently be this way, and that's where I think we are, we've got to cobble something together to try to just get by. It's going to be difficult. Like a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about it, and I'm like, regardless of how this thing goes, like, it's going to be very hard to go back to Wentz because they can't protect and he can't move very well. So unless they can figure out some kind of, hack to protect a little bit better, I think it's going to be very difficult for either one of these quarterbacks to summon up any kind of consistency on offense. But today was the first day where I'm a little like 17 doesn't cut it. The offense has to do better than this. It's one thing because, like, I'll be fair against, like, Heinicke played all year and it's new and everything. And Green Bay's defense is legitimately a top 10 defense, and they have legitimate corners on that team. And Indianapolis has a very, very good defense. And so I was okay with, they didn't score a lot of points. This week was the week at home where you're playing a weaker defense that you've got to do better than this. And if this is all they can typically muster week to week, well, they're not going to beat the 7-1 teams. Like, it's the reason why they're 7-1. Like, you can't let them off the hook like that. Like, you've got to make them beat you. And if you're going to only post 17 at home against them, well, then you got what you deserved, really.
Yeah, and the other thing that's disappointing, I'm looking at this, De'Ami Brown gets some snaps, 1 target, no catches. And the inability to get any sort of production out of that guy, and I know there were some injuries, but he's had a couple catches this year, and that's it. And that's really it in 2 years. I mean, that's part of the problem. When you have a guy like Dotson go out, you need a guy like Brown to step up more. Cam Sims, I've always liked, but they need more. They could have used more from a guy like Brown today. Logan Thomas, I'm looking at it, 3 targets, no catches.
Yeah,
he has. I mean,
well, he missed him badly twice. Missed him twice. Like one Thomas laid out to try to catch, and the other one went over his head, was an interception. I mean, like, Heinicke was really off today.
Yeah.
I just, what this team got good at the middle of last year when they had struggles kind of moving the ball through the air was they could run the ball really well. They kind of became a power run team. They haven't done that in 3-4 weeks, like, not consistently. Last week, Brian Robinson had lowest amount of carries, lowest amount of yards. The 2 leading rushers last week were Heinicke and Curtis Samuel. The combined rushes by Gibson and Robinson amounted to less than 40 yards. Like, this week, I'm sure the numbers aren't particularly great for the 2 of them. Biggest run of the day was probably Armani Rogers on an end around. Yep. Like, they need magic tricks to make big plays. And that's the part that's kind of hard with this, because I do look at their skill position people and I go, I think we can do better than this. Like, they're not limited.
Oh, they absolutely
there.
can do
They're
better.
not limited there.
So, and I'm looking at the run, and I looked at the run. I'm like, oh my God, they rushed for 137 yards. And then I look and say, oh yeah, 24 on the end around, 16 by Samuel on the one up the middle. So 40 yards by tight end and a receiver.
Yeah. Well, what's the number for Robinson and Gibson, which would be traditional runs?
Combined 24 for 80.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not good. That's a 3 yards a carry. That's not good. Like that's not good enough. So again, they're not running the ball, in my opinion, effectively enough. Why? I don't know. I need to probably rewatch. But today was the day I expected more out of the offense just in general, and they weren't able to produce it. And I do think it starts with the run, and then secondarily, Heinicke had a bad game. He was off. Yeah. He was really off today.
And like I said, every game it becomes a referendum on, is he? Oh, he's the guy. And then the next week's like, oh, you got to get rid of him. Obviously, you don't say that about, nobody's going to go that far, I would think. But it does seem to be the referendum game again for him. Like, you know what I mean? And so are you at any different point with him, or you just say, you know what, it's just a bad game by him, and let's see what happens next week?
Yeah, I think next week is I was driving home and I heard Fred Smoot on the postgame show basically say this is a career maker or breaker for him. Like, if he goes up there on Monday Night Football and beats an undefeated team, and he plays really well, and in that, and it's not just the defense that does it. Well, it's going to be very hard for Ron Rivera to take the ball out of his hands. If they go up there and the offense can't do anything and they lose, and they fall to 4-6, Rivera, assuming Wentz is available the following week, is going to have a very interesting decision to make, against one of the weakest teams in the NFL will be their next opponent. So that's going to be a very interesting decision to make. So this is a big week for Heinicke, but every quarterback has bad games, and I don't think you can just toss people aside, but his was not good. Today his clearly was not. I mean, obviously, you all know, listen to this show, I'm one of the guy's biggest proponents. I really like him. I like how he galvanizes the locker room. I like how people play for him. I like his moxie. I like his feel for the game. I see the limitations like anybody else, but I just like that about him. Today he was his own worst enemy at times. He made some really bad decisions, and he made some throws that I'm sure he wants back, because some of them weren't even the interception. The other one to Thomas, that the miss to Bates was inexplicably bad. I mean, they ran a perfect trick play. He has Bates streaking down the sideline, and he threw it 5 yards over his head out of bounds. I mean, it wasn't even close.
Yeah, and his accuracy at times can be definitely off, or maybe the ball's not getting there. You see receivers sometimes slowing down to catch the ball, but that's been true in the past when he's had good games too. Like that happened last week, and you end up having a really strong second half, etc. So the other, you're right though. I think that's a good way to put this game for him against Philly. It's going to be a game that could not going to define his career, but it's certainly one that if they win that game, Bram, I think they would. I would bet that they stick with him, because you can't get away from him. You can't at that point. If you go up there and beat Philly on a Monday night, you deserve to keep starting. And
I think he has an opportunity here to make a case that they should stick with him, and then at that point, it'll be up to him to try to lead them to the playoffs. If he does that, his career changes. Yeah. And I'm not trying to put all of that on him, but the reality is they went and acquired this other quarterback. I don't get the sense from them that they're backing off, at least. And I know a lot of us are talking and writing about well, what's going to happen if he keeps winning, and are they just going to move on, and maybe they can restructure their cap, and all these things that are all conjecture in week 9. Let's see how the second half of the season plays out. But on the other side of it is I haven't heard Ron Rivera for a second insinuate this is Heinicke's team, or we're definitively going this way. He's totally been let's see when we get there. This quarterback's not available. We don't not believe in Carson Wentz. So, this is a big game for Heinicke to make a point to the coaches that it's a bad idea to pull him out, and it's going to be on him. So there's a lot of pressure on him, but welcome to the NFL. He's been waiting for moments like this. He's got one this weekend to prove that he needs to be the quarterback moving forward.
And to be clear, Wentz is progressing. We saw him work out before the game today, throwing a bunch of passes, just kind of through a workout, occasionally kind of shaking his hand a little bit. The right ring finger is what he broke. And I think the other thing it's important to note with Wentz that even and I don't know that you're doing this, even when I look at it, like who's better for this team, depending on what happens, it's not really about that I never thought it was all Wentz's fault by any means.
No.
I just think that they did a poor job constructing that line to protect a guy who needed protection. And he's to operate at max efficiency, that guy needed more protection. And Heinicke needs more, but he can get away from it at times. When he doesn't, today's the result. It looks ugly. And that's what happens. Now, the other thing with that, Bram, too, Cosme's need to get that guy back. Cornelius Lucas had a tough day. Here's the other guy that to me is a wild card a little bit in all this, maybe one to watch in the last half of the season at some point, is I wonder where Chris Paul, like he's doing from my understanding is that he's done a nice job in practice. I don't know that he's there yet, from my understanding, but like he's done a nice job getting better. And defensive players have gone to some of the coaches and said, "Guy's got some heavy hands," and that's a compliment from a defensive player, right? So just one to watch. Like maybe in the last month of the season, a guy like that starts to emerge. Like, okay, he's ready. Put him in. Maybe that helps run game because he's a strong man. He is strong. Now, I don't know if that would improve protection. And I think these guys are going to stick with veterans right now because they're what you know. But I'm just saying, like, maybe that's a guy that down the road this year is one that you say, oh, maybe he's someone you can use in the future. Maybe he's a piece to add for the future. I don't know. But I do think he's going to be one to watch at some point, I think, this season. And it's, that's.
We'll have to see. Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if he's going to save the season, but like maybe you have a young guy at guard you can develop. You say, okay, maybe that position could be filled in the future.
I mean, yeah, I guess. I mean, just like the reality to me is like
that might be stretching.
I saw this coming. Like it just, one, there's some age. Then unfortunately you have some injuries. Chase Roulier gets hurt again, like Cosme got hurt.
Hurt.
So, but that stuff happens. And, they kept touting depth, but like I didn't see the frontline starters. I was concerned.
Right.
And, by the middle of the camp when everybody was getting hurt and Trey Turner wasn't practicing and Norwell wasn't practicing, I think it was just the flag was so red and so high to like, maybe you got to go do something about this. And they stuck with it and they trusted their instincts on it. And it's probably, if they're going to be honest about, the whole season, they'll probably look back and probably regret some of the decisions they made.
Oh, absolutely. They should.
Not that it's like, I don't blame them. Like, I know we go over this every time, but it's like, I don't blame them for Sheriff. For some reason, he didn't want their money. Right. I don't know why. They tried to pay him. I mean, they tried. For some reason, he didn't take it. With Flowers, I don't know exactly what happened. He also isn't playing with anybody else. But what ended up happening with both of them gone, the replacement isn't adequate enough. It's not to the level that you need. And, and I think that they trusted a couple of players they have great relationships with, a little too much mileage on their bodies. And like, same thing with Cornelius Lucas, who I think is a absolutely terrific backle. I think you're seeing why he's an absolutely terrific backup tackle, because here we are, 3-4 games into him having to start. And this is 2 weeks in a row that he has struggled pretty hard. And to be fair to him, blocking Daniil Hunter and Zadarius Smith is a very difficult task, but it's not good enough right now. Right. So they're going to have to make some choices.
Right. And I agree with you. Like, again, roster construction hurt the team. It hurt Carson Wentz, and it's hurting Heinicke. So I think that's a big problem. Bram, I do want to close it out. Like, this has been a crazy, crazy week because the announcement of the possible sale, we've talked about that on the podcast, but also then you have Ron Rivera's mom dying. This was a very tough week for him. And you could see it at the podium after the press conference, how it affected him. And it didn't come up today because some things aren't always important to come up, but you could just tell the toll it took on him. And then the news about Coy Gibbs passing away, Joe Gibbs' son, Coy, passing away. And Ron, after the post game, came up and just said he wanted to send his condolences. And it was hard for him to get through it. And it was hard for him to answer some questions early on. So I just can't imagine having to coach in a week like that, where you lost somebody that dear to you. And then for the Gibbs family, it's just crushing. And getting to know that family over, a little bit when Joe was here, and how important his kids were to him. He's lost his 2 boys, man. That just, it makes you choke up when you think about it. And obviously there are things that are more important than all of this. This is a game and we talk about it. It's fun. It's our jobs. But man, I just can't imagine the pain that that the Gibbs family's going through. And I know with Ron, with his mom, that's a tough thing as well. So just, an emotional week, and, prayers are out for both families.
Yeah, this was difficult. That was very difficult to say during the game today. That was like as a native Washingtonian, Joe Gibbs
The
is
first family of football here.
I don't know that he's not the most, important sporting figure that's ever come through this town. And then add on to the fact that like he's just a wonderful person and everybody knows that, And so I can't imagine. And I've also, I've stated this before. I've had some very lucky moments, very fortunate moments, and I'm grateful always to have the proximity and the jobs that I've had with them. One of them was I got to host the Joe Gibbs show for a couple of years when he was here.
Yeah.
And, that was the one time as a reporter / fan where it was like almost surreal because I grew up with him, being the most important figure to ever come through here. I share the sentiments that everybody probably feels and said, like, I can't believe that happened to him twice. And I can't imagine the pain, and especially two in a short period of time like that. And they're not old men. I feel terrible for him. With Coach Rivera, I like everybody, expressed my condolences to him when I had the opportunity. I lost my father, in the midst of working in this industry where you kind of don't take time off at specific times of years to grieve properly. And so I understand that it's different, but I understand it. Like I found out about my father dying an hour and a half before I did a Sports Center, but I did it. And I understand how I can, I'm just, not that I'm trying to compare anything, but like, I get it. Like he can't just take time off, even if he wanted to, and he has to just come back here and put on a steady face and coach. And it's not easy. The only other thing I would just say about it is like, things have been tough here on him. He's not just a head coach. Some of the stuff he's brought on himself, he wants to run a front office and be a head coach. And some of this stuff, like, you referenced the sale news and all the other headlines that are really out of his control that he's had to kind of answer for. He's been far more, of a representative for the team than he would have ever even probably thought he was signing up for, even though knew he was signing up for something that was different when he did it a few years ago. And, it's like when they were 1-4 a few weeks ago, and everybody was kind of coming at him actually for the first time, like really hard at him. And there was a lot there to criticize on the field, like time management decisions, the Wentz decision, maybe, if you really want to go there at that point, some of the other stuff, and they were just losing, and then it's year 3 and they didn't have a very good record. It's natural to kind of come at him. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, but the way some people came at him very personally, really kind of bothered me. Cause like, not unlike Gibbs, I have a lot of reverence for who this person is as a man and as a leader. And I'll sit here and criticize, football decisions or football stuff, but I know what he's about. And I just felt like a few weeks ago, like, while I think it's okay to criticize, 1-4 is not, worth praising. I just felt like some of it was a little, I'm not going to be specific about it, but I just thought some of it from what was being said from people who have prominent voices here was a little too personal for my taste. And this was yet another reminder this past week. This man lost his mother, had to, just coach through it. And in the same week that he found out, there's going to be probably a pretty major shakeup in the organization that he belongs to. And, that's nothing new over 3 years for him. And I just think he deserves a little bit of everybody, reminding themselves that like the wins and the losses are very, very, very important. Sometimes who represents you matters. And so I've been very, defensive of him because I think he's been through a lot. And it doesn't change the fact that I want them to win more, or that I think they should have scored more points today, or all sorts of, or that I think they made a mistake with choices on the offensive line. Like, it doesn't change any of that. But I do feel like, not that we should be kid gloves with him at all, but just be cognizant of the human being and what he's been for this organization. And
yeah, no, I think that's well said. And I think it's hard because we do get to know these people. Like, we get to know, we know DeShazer Ever. When he was here, we knew him pretty well, right? And when some stuff happens like last year, you know the person, right? And so I think even in this case, you can see the pain. You talk to him after a press conference or whatever, and you can hear the pain or see it in the eyes, the tearing up when he's talking about his mom and trying to fight through it. I do know he's going out there this week to, the burial's out in California, the funeral's out there, so he'll be out there for a couple of days. But I just can't imagine having to coach through all this stuff, all the emotion, the heavy toll the last few years. He's paid very well to do all this stuff, but this stuff, like the other stuff, is different than this one. Losing a parent is very, very difficult, and the Gibbs family losing a child is just horrendous. So I think you just want to keep that in mind, and this is a tough stretch and an important stretch for this team too, that he's trying to balance all that. And it's where I think one thing that helps is the defense. Jack Del Rio's done a good job. People don't like to hear it, but he's done a good job with the defense this year, especially lately. They're playing well. And, and
he's done a really good
Katcher,
job.
Yeah, Nate Katcher, experienced special teams.
Their leading tackler hasn't played for them 2 weeks in a row. They didn't even have his backup today, and they held Minnesota to their lowest point total of the year.
Right, exactly. So they're playing well. And then, now Scott Turner, I think I think there's still some growth that's taking place with them as a coordinator. I think that's probably a little bit of a harder job to grow into, but the other ones have experienced it. So anyway, I think it's a tough time for him, and you could see it on the face. And I know, like, when he lost his brother when he was in Carolina, and it was right before the season. And it wasn't until after the season that he could really properly grieve, and then it hit him like a ton of bricks. So it's just, you try to fight through this stuff, and it's sometimes you're like, this is just real life. I think as you get older too, and then there's, you understand, the different perspective on what's truly important. And I know I wrote a story on him earlier this summer about the cancer and the impact on him. And one of the things his wife told me is that he's getting better at not saying no to certain family things, because you get to know, like, hey, you don't know when, and these things are important. So anyway, that's a message for everybody. Bram, let's end it there. And for everybody listening, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back on Tuesday night for a Therapy Tuesday session, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, live on YouTube. Bring your questions, bring your complaints, bring whatever you want to bring, and we'll discuss it. And I have a feeling I know some of the topics, probably some play calling, I'm sure, because we always get them. But we'll go back and watch the game and see what we learned from watching that, and we'll go from there. So hang in there, folks, and we'll talk to you next time.